Hi, I'm Lily, and this is my story. It's a story about change, about feeling lost and finding myself again. It's a story about how one summer turned my life around and taught me something that I'll never forget. But let me ask you something first. Have you ever felt like everything in your life was falling apart? Like the world you knew was changing so fast that you couldn't keep up? That's how I felt when my parents decided to split up. It was like my home had been turned upside down. My dad moved to another city. My mom was always busy, and I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. I missed the way things used to be. I missed feeling happy, safe, and loved. But then, something happened. I went to stay with my Aunt Clara for the summer. And little did I know, that summer would change everything. This is the story of what happened. Chapter 1. The Cottage in the Garden. When I arrived at Aunt Clara's cottage, I wasn't excited. In fact, I didn't want to be there at all. The cottage was small, with ivy climbing up the walls, and a little garden filled with wildflowers. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, but I couldn't see the magic in it. I stood there with my suitcase, feeling like a stranger. Aunt Clara came out to greet me. She had a warm smile and kind eyes. But I felt too sad to smile back. "Welcome, Lily," she said, giving me a hug. "This summer will be special for you, I promise." I didn't believe her. How could it be special when I felt so broken inside? Chapter 2. The Garden of Lessons. The next morning, Aunt Clara woke me up early. "Come on, Lily," she said cheerfully. "Let's start the day in the garden." I groaned. "I don't feel like gardening." She laughed. "Sometimes, we have to do things we don't feel like doing. Come on, I'll show you." In the garden, Aunt Clara handed me a pair of gloves and pointed to some weeds. "Pull these out," she said. "They're taking up space where flowers could grow." I sighed and started pulling out the weeds. As I worked, Aunt Clara began to talk. "Do you know what this garden teaches me?" she asked. I shook my head. "It teaches me that sometimes we need to let go of what's not good for us," she said. "Even if it's hard, even if it hurts, that's the only way to make room for something better." Her words stayed with me. Was that what I needed to do? Let go of the sadness and anger I felt about my parents? It seemed impossible, but maybe Aunt Clara was right. Chapter 3. Rainy Day Memories. A few days later, it started to rain. The soft tapping of raindrops on the roof made the cottage feel cozy and warm. Aunt Clara brought out an old box of photographs. "Come sit with me," she said. "I want to show you something." Inside the box were pictures of my family. There were silly selfies of my parents, photos of birthday parties, and even a picture of me as a baby, covered in cake. We laughed at some of the pictures, but others made me feel a little sad. "Do you think I'll ever feel happy like this again?" I asked Aunt Clara. She looked at me with her kind eyes. "Happiness changes shape, Lily. she said. "It may not look the same as it did before, but it can still be beautiful. You just have to keep looking for it." Chapter 4: Finding My Voice. One of the hardest parts of that summer was learning to talk about my feelings. Aunt Clara encouraged me to write in a journal. "Write down everything you're feeling," she said. "Don't worry about spelling or grammar, just let it out." At first, I didn't know what to write, but slowly, the words started to flow. I wrote about how angry I was at my parents, how scared I was about the future, and how lonely I felt. One evening, I showed my journal to Aunt Clara. She read it quietly and then said, "Lily, you're so brave. Sharing your feelings is the first step to healing." Chapter 5: A New Kind of Happiness. As the summer went on, I started to see things differently, the little things that I had ignored before, like the smell of Aunt Clara's lavender tea, or the way the sun set behind the cottage, began to make me smile. One afternoon, Aunt Clara and I baked cookies together. We laughed when the dough stuck to our fingers, and when the cookies came out a little too crispy. "Life is like these cookies," Aunt Clara said. "Sometimes it doesn't turn out the way you expect, but it can still be sweet." Chapter 6: New Faces, New Friends. As the summer unfolded, I began to venture out of Aunt Clara's garden, and into the little neighborhood surrounding her cottage. It was a quiet area, with cobblestone paths, and houses that looked like they had been plucked from a storybook. One afternoon, Aunt Clara suggested, "Lily, why don't you come with me to the local farmer's market? You might meet some of the neighbors." I hesitated, but eventually agreed. The market was bustling with people, friendly faces, stalls overflowing with fresh produce, and the scent of baked bread in the air. While Aunt Clara chatted with the baker, a girl about my age approached me. "Hi, I'm Emma," she said with a wide grin. "Hi, I'm Lily," I replied, feeling a little shy. Emma didn't seem to notice. "Do you want to come to the park later? A bunch of us meet there after lunch. It's fun." I glanced at Aunt Clara, who gave me an encouraging nod. "Sure," I said, and for the first time in a while, I felt a spark of excitement. Chapter 7: Secrets in the Park. That afternoon, I met Emma and her friends in the park. There was Max, who had a mischievous grin and a talent for climbing trees, and Sophie, who was quieter but had a warm laugh. We spent the afternoon talking, playing games, and sharing snacks. As the sun began to set, we all sat in a circle under a big oak tree. "Let's play a game," Emma suggested. "It's called Secrets." I hesitated. The idea of sharing a secret made me nervous, but everyone else seemed excited. Emma started. "Okay, my secret is, I'm terrified of heights, but I climbed that tree last week just to prove I could do it." We all laughed, and then it was Sophie's turn. She blushed and said, "I have a box under my bed, where I keep all my favorite things: letters, pictures, Little treasures. It's like my secret world. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and said, "My parents just got divorced, and I feel like everything is falling apart." There was a moment of silence, and then Emma said, "That's tough, Lily, but you're not alone. We're here for you." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. Chapter 8. Aunt Clara's Past. One evening, after a long day in the garden, Aunt Clara and I sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "Lily," Aunt Clara said, breaking the silence, "did you know I wasn't always happy here?" I looked at her, surprised. Aunt Clara always seemed so content, so sure of herself. "When I was your age, I went through a hard time too," she continued. "I lost someone very close to me, my best friend, Alice." I waited quietly, sensing that this was something Aunt Clara didn't often talk about. "Alice and I did everything together," Aunt Clara said, her voice soft with memory. "But one day, she moved away. We wrote letters at first, but then life got busy. We drifted apart." She paused, her eyes glistening. "For years, I felt like I'd lost a piece of myself, but then I realized something. The memories we shared were still a part of me. And even though Alice wasn't in my life anymore, she had shaped the person I'd become." Her words resonated with me. Maybe I didn't have to hold on to the past so tightly. Maybe it was okay to let go and move forward. Chapter 9. A Stormy Night. One night, a storm rolled in. The wind howling and rain lashing against the windows. I was curled up on the couch, feeling restless. Aunt Clara joined me with a blanket and a cup of hot cocoa. "Storms can be scary," she said, "but they remind us how strong we are. We weather them, and then the sun comes out again." She told me stories about her own storms, times when life had been difficult, but she had found a way through. "Strength doesn't mean you don't feel scared," she said. "It means you keep going, even when you are." Chapter 10. A Farewell to Remember. The last week of summer was filled with moments I wanted to hold on to forever. Emma, Max, and Sophie threw me a surprise goodbye party in the park. We laughed, shared stories, and promised to keep in touch. On my final night at Aunt Clara's cottage, she handed me a small, wrapped package. "Open it when you get home," she said with a smile. The next day, as I drove away, I looked back at the little cottage, and the garden that had become my sanctuary. When I got home, I opened Aunt Clara's gift. Inside was a tiny potted flower, and a note that said, "Remember, life is a garden. Keep planting seeds of hope and love, and watch them grow." Epilogue. A new beginning. That summer changed me. It taught me that even when life feels like it's falling apart, there's always a way to put the pieces back together. I stayed in touch with Aunt Clara, Emma, and the others. And as the years went by, I carried their lessons with me, to cherish memories, to embrace change. and to always look for the beauty in life's garden. This is my story, and I hope it inspires you to find your own strength, no matter what storms come your way.